the Power Virtual Agent, maybe just around the room, who's actually worked with the Power Virtual Agent and played around, knows what it's about. A lot of heads going no, a few hands rising up. Okay, and some waves on the other side, almost a full house, like we said. All right, so just then from a Power Virtual Agent perspective, it is basically giving you the capabilities to relatively easily, similar to most of the Power Platform, give you the ability with the front end to create topics, create a chat with somebody else. You can publish a chat to a website or even going to different channels, which we'll go through a little bit later on. But as you'll see throughout today's session, it is relatively straightforward with regards to how do you actually create these topics. We're going to cover some areas off with regards to what do you need to take into consideration for trigger phrases and things like that, but we'll go through those as we carry on. So why Power Virtual Agent? You'll see there's rapid creation without code. Like we said, most things in the Power Platform. I'm just going to skip through most of these until the end. But basically, it's a low code, no code scenario. You're getting a quick return on investment. You can actually, when we go through to the audiences, you'll see that you can, in Teams, create a chatbot inside a specific team. And that will go, unfortunately, not directly to a specific channel, but it will go to that specific team. And so when you're thinking about introducing Power Virtual Agent into an organization, obviously this is going to give, like most of the things with the Power Platform, access to what we call the citizen developer. But again, as we've had with the other sessions as well, don't think of it as losing control into your environments. You still have access to the Center of Excellence, which will give you that access to see how many bots have been created in what environment. Are they actually following a perfect standard across? Are they doing it in a dev environment, a test environment, and going to a production environment? So just because you are giving access potentially to other people creating these virtual agents, it doesn't mean you have to lose that control. All right. So when we think about the audience, as I said a little bit earlier on, if you start granting that audience capability to create these chatbots within Teams, you're looking at for basically almost like a departmental bot, which means that it is somebody that's kind of thought, okay, well, this will be quite a cool idea. Let's add it into Teams, and I will show you how to create that chatbot within Teams itself. And then alternatively, what you can go to the further one is what is known as the internal bot, which is basically the idea where you actually start getting IT involved, building these bots out in solutions, and you can actually start deploying them through. Typically, those bots aren't going to be the bots that are going to be residing inside Teams. Those bots are going to be the bots that you would want to actually extend to a mobile app, put it onto a website, and actually get a greater or larger audience. And then obviously there you get to the last one, which is the external bot, which is basically you want to get the same processing. There's a lot more complex scenarios that you can go through, and we'll talk about extending the Power Virtual Agent as well, and how you can actually get information, not just with what you're actually putting into your topics, or something that we'll discuss a little bit later on regarding the entities. I know we've changed the name to tables, and now we've got entities into Power Virtual Agents, and they do mean something a bit differently, but you can actually get information from external systems as well by extending Power Virtual Agent. All right, quick chat, all that. Let's start creating our bot. Okay, so now this is the part where I quickly just shoot up a prayer and hope that everything goes well. So yeah, pretty much. Okay, so what I've done is I've quickly gone to Teams, and I have just clicked on the three dots over here and clicked on more apps. And from there, you can actually search for what apps you want to add. And from there, I can click on Power Virtual Agent. So what this will do is create basically a Power Virtual Agent within Teams. After I click on the add button over here, I'm going to get prompted with a screen to say, well, great, what team in that do you want to create your bot with? So this is the one way of creating a virtual agent bot. The other way, similar to what we get with Flow and so forth, is to actually go directly to the designer, and there I'll be able to create a bot that will reside outside of Teams. but I can still enable that bot to be linked to Teams as a channel, and I'll show you that process as well as we go along. So I've just clicked on chatbots. And look at that, we don't have any chatbots. My goodness, okay, so we're going to just hit the new chatbot over there. So the first thing is what we're going to have to do is give your bot a name. Now, typically from my perspective, normally when I start in this scenario, I kind of start thinking about, okay, well, let's just actually give it a random name, but actually give your bot, you know, give it a John or something, make it something personal. Don't just give it a starting test bot or something like that, because that's going to be your chatbot's name. It also going to, if you link it to omnichannel, it will pull through to those. So let's just click on Torso and getting things ready. So while we wait for that, I will switch over to the other designer. So this is basically the other designer. So the one was where I clicked through on Teams itself. This is one where I've actually gone and created, logged into Power Virtual Agent, and I've got the topics and areas where I can design my bot over here. Difference that you'll see over here is on the top right, normally like we normally would select our environments and so forth, I can actually switch and change to our box. And there you'll see, for example, getting started. I'm using a couple of examples of bad naming conventions. Getting started, not really giving me anything about this bot. All right, so that's not going to be one of the good naming conventions. Similar to that, apologies, I've clicked away from that, but you can click on the new bot, which will give you the option to create a new bot. And let's just go over here. So the big thing about bots is the topics. So what you'll see on the right-hand side over here is a list of topics that basically the bot would listen to start working with responses. Sorry, that's my preparation over there from this morning. Let's just clean that up. So what a topic basically does is that's your chat path. So when you start thinking about designing your bot, and we spoke about the audiences and things like that a little bit earlier on, but once it starts coming down to topics, the things that almost triggers going into that topic, and it's similar to working with our Power Automate, and that is the trigger and the phrases. So it will look for certain things to decide on what path do I need to go? What topic do I need to use? So if you have trigger phrases that are very similar, the bot will not know or won't be able to recognize what the topic is going to be. So you're going to start getting a little bit of conflict. You're going to start having a bad bot experience because the bot's going to tell you, well, I don't know what to do. Can you please rephrase? Do I need to go down this path or that path? And it's going to start asking the person that's chatting to this bot to kind of give it a lot more information. So try and work for these key phrases to make sure that your trigger points in that is very specific to a specific area. So you'll see, for example, over there on the admin side, I've got 2 trigger phrases over here called help, what I need to do. So, oh my goodness, we really need some help over here. Okay, we're going to do a heavy refresh over here. But basically, while the page refreshes is, so those trigger phrases, what will happen is as I typed in help on the chat on the left-hand side, once the page is refreshed, it will actually follow the path that I have asked it to go through. So ask the questions and that. So the moment I type in help over here, for example, the bot will actually recognize the help as a trigger phrase to that specific topic, and it will follow that path. And then from there, it's going to ask me a couple of questions or whatever I have set up that path to do. So to manage and work with this, so after I've clicked now through onto my topic, you'll see over here is the first area, which is called the trigger phrases, which is currently I've put in there help or what do I need to do. Similar to that in the beginning, what you would have seen is there are a couple of pre-built trigger phrases, some of them that were set, I think it was lesson 1 to 5 or something like that. And then there's a greeting, there's an end conversation and that. Some of them you can switch off, some of them you cannot switch off. So one of the things is, for example, the greeting one is already pre-configured for you. So if I had to say to this bot over here to say hi, or hello rather, it's going to respond a little bit differently, and it's going to go into a different greeting phrase. Now I've left this again, just showing you a couple of things that I would want to highlight to say these are things that when you're creating your bot and wanting to put it into the public domain or even just for internal use, the greeting is already pre-configured. So if you don't go and change this greeting, you're going to get something like this that doesn't necessarily make sense. So, and this is what you're going to see later on as we go through on the admin side as well. I don't have anything with regards to store or account information. I've kind of kept it a bit more around the Power Platform side. So to do this, you need to go into the greeting topic and change the responses, what the bot is actually going to do with that greeting topic, similar to ending the conversation and that. So those are items that you need to be aware of. So one of the things is what you would have seen is after I asked it for help, it asked me what I wanted to do. So how do we do that configuration? So if I click on the right-hand side over there for conversation authoring or something like that, sorry, I'm South African and Afrikaans, so definitely not too great there in all the pronunciations. But what you will see at the top over here is my path or flow that I want this bot to do. So you'll see at the top, similar to what we already got with Power Automate, is say what's going to be my triggers. So my triggers for this bot is help, what I need to do, things like that. And the bot will listen to that and it will actually start actioning these steps. So what's the first thing it needs to do? It needs to ask a question. Do you need help? And below that, you'll see I've got a multiple choice. And we're going to go through about how to create these as well. So I can go through a yes, no, and that's similar to what you're seeing over here, yes and no. So it will, the more choices I get, it will actually do the choice options horizontally. And from there, if I scroll down, you'll see it does a branch out. So a conditional branch, depending on whether I said yes or whether I said no, what is the path and what are the responses that's going to be needed. So for example, if we follow this path and I said, no, you don't need help, well, it's just going to reply and say, well, that's surprising. And we are very stoked that you can do this on yourself, and happy days, and we go. Alternatively, if you said yes, then we're asking for a bit more information. So what you will see over here is we're asking for the person's name. So what you'll see, the previous one at the top, we had an option over here, and it was a multiple choice. So if I clicked on that and I search for person, you'll see there's a couple that's predefined over here. And if I scroll further down, which will get a Power Platform one. Oh my goodness. And you'll see it's a closed list of 4. Now these are, and I'll show you that a little bit later, these are what we call entities. So you can actually work with this entity and you can define what you want these responses to be. So as we go down, so we're asking it, what's your name? Underneath it, you'll see it saves the response into a variable, which is called str name. So that's just my naming convention. You can change the name of these variables as you want. So one of the things is what you will see is if I go over here, it's going to go into that path and it's going to ask me what is my name. And you'll see I can actually follow on the designer the path that the chatbot is working. So I'm actually busy right now testing my bot to seeing what it needs to do. So if I now say, okay, I am JJ at test.test, not a very good name. So there's a purpose behind that, because basically later on, if I follow this path quickly, you'll see there's a path that it actually asks for an email. But basically what I have just done is I've provided the email address instead of my name. So what you'll see over here is if I start showing the variables, it's actually populated the email variable. So the bot already picks up that I have provided it with an email address. So as it starts chatting and you have a little bit more knowledge, more variables or more entities through it, it is actually aware of what you are actually busy changing and populating. So it doesn't re-ask these questions.
Very clever.
So let's just say my name is JJ. So what it also did is it picked up that I've didn't answer the question. So it didn't populate basically that variable or to say, okay, well, what's the name variable? So if I scroll up now, you'll see the email question was never asked. It picked that up, say, okay, well, you've already provided that information. Let's skip that. Let's move over to the other side. And similar to that is now at the bottom of what we've got is the question about, can we open the presentation? And I'll have that's a little bit of a shorter side of that. I'll tell you the long story behind that. That's when we're going to get into RPA. But it's supposed to open the presentation, which it's not. Unfortunately, my connected to my PC didn't want to connect, so I kept on getting a slow response. So I could not execute my desktop flow. But basically, you just need to have your gateway working, not like mine is not working. And then I can actually, from a Power Automate, execute a desktop flow. And from that, obviously, the desktop flow would have quite nicely opened up my presentation, which we'll get to in the second half of the session. Okay, perfect. Cheers. Any questions so far?
How's it determining if already answered the email question? So that just kind of smarts around.
No, there's a couple of AI items behind it, so it's got some smarts around it. So it will look at, so the email one, it's pays very specific attention to the format that was provided. But one of the things as well is if I reset this quickly, and that's a very good question, is basically if I had to say hi, I need help on flow, it will actually pick up that I'm already interested in Power Automate. So let's just wait for it. So there, what you'll see over there is the SDR options picked up Power Automate. So just because, and it's with that, it's already gone into my specific defined topic. So I see a couple of frowns around the room to say, well, how does flow equal to Power Automate? Because the words and all that doesn't match at all. So with that is basically the definition of what we spoke about a little bit earlier, and that is the concept of entities. Now, we know that with regards to entities previously, as we know from a Power Platform perspective, they're now called tables. This is maybe why they're called tables now, because we've got entities for virtual agents, but they mean a little bit, they've got a different meaning to the Power Virtual Agent. It's still holding blocks of information, but if I had to go to my Power Platform one over here, so I've given it a few choices that are, or options that it can actually display to the end user, but then you'll see over here, I can give it also additional synonyms. So it will know that if I've put in Cloudflow or Flow, I'm actually wanting to talk about Power Automate. If for Power Virtual Agent, and I put in Chatbot, and we'll actually use those to actually determine what are those other areas to actually translate and populate these variables. So that's basically what it's using to determine what additional information based on the metadata that is supplied to pre-populate these variables. Okay, so let's just do this quickly again. Oh, topics. So one of the other areas that we want to go through is, okay, so we asked it to do that, and we are going to ask it now for flow. So what you'll see over here with the flow, and just, I didn't use the flow to actually just show you that it's actually going to go and execute a flow, but it's using basically Power Automate to extend this to another system. So I've actually asked it now to go and create a lead inside my dynamic system, because this person gave me their personal information, they gave me the interest, what they need support on. So I've used a normal Power Automate basically to have the trigger to go to flow. And those things are, and I mean, these things are pretty nice to say and talk about. So if we go to ask question, obviously those are the questions we saw a little bit earlier on, where I can type in my question. I can use the identity or the entities that I've populated to start giving me choices or options. As we saw a little bit earlier on, those then branch off into other areas that I can ask different questions, different topics. Further down, as you can see over here, if we do on the plus, So I'm going to horribly break my chatbot right now. This is one that we do not want to publish after this. But you can say go to another topic. So I can transfer from this topic to another topic, which will have a different chat choice trees and things like that. So when you start thinking about the Power Virtual Agent and the chats that you need to follow, is really, you need to map this out. You need to sit down and say, what is the path or the journey that you want this end user to go through? And you've got to think about these trigger points, because you are obviously not just you guiding them through a specific path, but the other thing is also you don't want their answers to move them to other topics necessarily without you also wanting them or knowing about that movement. But the one that I wanted to show you that we had a question on about now earlier. Yes.
Topic, does it bring all the information about it? With it?
Oh, very good question. Okay, I'm just going to repeat the question there to the audience online as well. So the question was, if we move to another topic, does it move the information that's already been populated? Or, and I'm assuming your question is referring to the variables and those type of things. So by default, if you do not pay attention to when you're creating these questions, the default is going to be no. However, you can actually switch that to yes, which means you can transfer the information to another topic. So for example, I've already populated my name. So when I do that transfer, it is aware that I've given the name and it will actually continue that conversation because it now actually knows who I am. If the variable wasn't populated, what it will do is it will transfer you to the topic where that variable gets populated and then populate that variable. So for example, if I had a topic for personal information and I had a topic for Power Platform, on the Power Platform and realized, hey, hold on, I don't know what your first name is, it will actually transfer me to the topic for personal information and ask me those questions. A lot of nods, everybody follow that? Perfect. So what you'll see over here is create lead, which is normal Power Automate. Alternatively, I can create a new flow. So if I click on create new flow, what is important from this perspective is it will utilize from a licensing perspective, the flows that is associated with the Power Virtual Agent counter. So it doesn't do an increase on my other flows or my other Power Automates. It actually uses the Power Automate flows within this license. So that's why it's quite important to have that trigger from your Power Virtual Agent directly. So unfortunately, in our worlds these days, we've got to be very wary on where we use what and what the counters are. So just be aware of that. If I do create my flow from within the Power Virtual Agent, you'll see similar to what we have with Power Apps, you'll see that your trigger is from Power Virtual Agent. So I'm going to just click on that create over there. And unfortunately, I have to move this unless there's somebody.
You might be able to move if you look at your top, the far left, there's the light here, you drag it.
Oh, look at that. Always somebody in the room that can help, right? I've learned something today as well. All right. So what you'll see, this is just a blank canvas for my Power Automate. And from here, I get access to a lot of the additional information. I'm not going to populate this one. I want to take you quickly through one that is already populated, the one that I've got with creating the lead. So what you'll see over here is a list of the input variables. So similar to those who have used Power Automate with Power Apps, it's the same experience. You've got your input variables, you've got your output variables, and you have what you want the flow itself to do. So one of the things is from this flow over here, you'll see it's going to go to my trigger point. From there, it's going to do an action, and from there, it's going to return to basically back to the virtual agent. If we look at the information that's currently on the screen, I do have a question for, unfortunately, those online, unless you want to raise your hand and answer the question, you're more than welcome to. We'll read it out here. But my question to those around here in the room is this, the end result for this, will it be a good experience or bad experience for the person that is chatting with this chatbot? Okay, so we had a very prompt response. I should, although there are some mints there on the table, so you're welcome to get a mint. So the response was basically, it depends on how long the flow takes to execute, which is 100% correct. The end user is going to have to wait until this flow is executed to get back to what the chatbot, because then the chatbot's again aware of, okay, this has happened. So what's the easiest way to change that? Say again, sorry? Okay, so the one response, unfortunately, you're not going to get a mint for that one, is to tell them what we're working with. All right. Actually, the answer to the solution is actually a lot simpler than that. And that is just purely, okay, unfortunately, this is now, I don't know why I cannot move that. Wait, let's move that one up. There we go. That's basically, okay, fine. There's a couple of things that I'm missing, and we don't take this as a very good Power Automate, and this is how we need to write our Power Automates going forward. Please put your try catches and your error flows and things like that in there. But by moving these around, the end user is not going, or the chatbot will not wait for the response. The Power Automate's already going to give it its response back while it goes off to create the lead inside the dynamic system. So the end user doesn't have to wait for that processing to happen. So just by moving a couple of things around, so you need to be aware of the processing on the flow and what you want your end user to work with. Right, any questions on this?
So it always waits for a response.
Yes, correct.
Do that asynchronously to.
Yeah, it will basically always wait for a response.
What
So
value-
obviously with that as well, to the comment around asynchronously, obviously it needs to wait for the flow to initiate and all that as well. So it is not necessarily going to be such a seamless experience to the person chatting, but it is an option to get them information from your external systems. And again, just going back to the low code, no code scenario, this is basically one of the easier ways to actually extend and utilizing some of the systems or tools that we already got in our bag. All right. One of the things is if your flows fail, Power Virtual Agent does not like that. Okay, it will kind of tell the person in the chat that, okay, well, something went wrong. So please put your try catches in, do your error handling in your Power Automate. If you don't know how to do that, let us know. We can probably do a quick session on those, just so that you can see how to do some error handling around Power Automate. But yeah, it doesn't, the Power Virtual Agent does not like negative responses. All right, there's a couple of
Okay,
other tricks
just
you
a
can
question.
do, and that is with regards to limiting the
you hear me?
retries and things like that. So once you've gone through and done that to limit your retries, it will also give your end user a faster approach. Any questions? Anybody online?
There's a question, but I'm asking if they can type it.
Okay, so while we wait for that one. So that in essence, in a nutshell, is creating your bot. So one of the things is, just what I want to touch base on before we go to the last area that I want to show you about publishing the bot and connecting it to the other channels, is just our extension options. So what we saw is those questions and entities that we've got, that just gives us topics or variables and information about the chatting, asking questions and getting replies and answers to. But basically the Power Automate is one of the means to actually get information from outside my bot and from other systems and bringing that information into my bot. Other areas that I would like to actually have another session on is to actually use the framework composer as well as the framework skills, which is extending it to giving you a lot more flexibility working with the UI, actually extending and putting a little bit more code behind it. So that is, if you go back to what we had, the citizen, the audience being the citizen developer, then the like myself, the average Power Platform dude, not working with real code, and then we're getting the framework, which is the actual a framework that you can apply quite heavy extension around adding additional features, functions using physical code. Yes.
So before you're moving on, there's a question from Awad bin Saleh. What is the value that the Power Virtual Agent return, and what will it do with that value?
Okay, right. So that's a very good question. So if I go back to over here and return values, you'll basically see similar to what we've got with using Power Automate from a Power Apps perspective. You can actually decide whether it's just going to be a yes, no, a number, and a text value, and you can also have multiples of these. So inside your Power Automate, you will actually define what the output variables will be, and you can set them as you work through these action steps. And then it will actually return that information back to the basically back to your agent. And from those comes back as variables, which you then in return can use. Hopefully that answers the questions.
They will let me know.
They will let you know. All right. So, but yes, you'll see there's the yes, no, basically just a typical Boolean field, and the other one will be a number, just so that you can kind of build up what is being expected from that perspective.
Just say thanks.
Well,
we did answer it.
Cool. Thanks is always good. So one of the things is, okay, yes, we want to leave this one and not really publish that, well, save that, but before I can actually utilize my bot externally, I need to publish. It's quite similar to what we see from a Dynamics perspective. By doing that, I can just click on publish over here, and it will make my bot available. If I click it further down, you'll see over here, we spoke about the channels. So if I click on Teams, it will ask me, do I want to add this bot to Teams? I can click on yes, add it to Teams. And there we go. Depending on what you need to do do you want to submit it for general use? Obviously, depending on whether you've got admin rights in that, you need to submit it for your approval. Otherwise, the people utilizing this bot need to know exactly what the bot's name is. So you can either share it out directly with them or actually get it on top of a specific channel. Our other options, let me just quickly close this off. If I wanted to add it to a mobile app, for example, what you'll see over here is the code that you need to embed inside your app, and this pretty much becomes a matter of copying and pasting this and putting it into your app where you want the bot to be displayed. All these things sound extremely easy and quick to do. Obviously, they do have a little bit of loopholes around that. So one of the things is, and that will be my last area around the bot, because so that we can still have some time for the RPA stuff. And that is to say, okay, well, if we wanted to do a handoff to a live agent, how would we actually do that? So I can say, go to my gear over here at the top, which will be my general settings. And from there, I can say transfer to agent. And it will then ask me what I want to transfer to. Do I want to do, unfortunately, this one's already connected to customer service, but you can get customer service as one connector, and you can get alternatively another chat system that you want to hand over to. What it will require you to do is to register, obviously, the app with Azure. And then after you've got your app registration ID, you just put that in and you go through that step. Relatively quick, relatively seamless to do that process. Just make sure that your omni-channel is working and is configured correctly. So it will be for an agent source, not necessarily an agent. So if I go to my omni-channel, basically what this would do is it will actually do a prompt. It will go to the queue to say, okay, well, this person needs to be handed over. So any agent that is available can take that conversation and go forward with it.
There's another question from Albert again. Can we transfer to Teams?
Can we transfer to Teams?
To a chat.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't tried that. You can use the Power Automate to transfer your details to Teams and put that into a chat just using a normal connector for Teams. So you would be able to do that to get the information across. I'll need to have a look into that. We'll get back to you. Maybe on the next community session, we'll give you an answer on that one. I'll need to have a look for you on that one.
Cool.
All right. Now, similar to that, there are my other options to, and obviously if you want to do a quick one to kind of see what it will look like, you can go to a demo site over here and you'll see there's a link at the bottom. You can just copy that, put it in the browser, and you can see what this bot would look like and work with from a browser perspective. So I'll just do that quite quick. Hopefully I don't have anything bad in there.
Well, Eliza mentioned that it's not supported, but we can all vote for it.
Well, thank you.
The link is there, yeah.
So basically, if I do just quickly a type out on a help over here, you'll see that the bot's going to respond and basically give us that same journey. Obviously, I don't have now the designer giving me the ability to see what the flow in that's going to be. All right, so the second part of the session, before I move over to Power Automate Desktop, which was quite a personal challenge for me. My good friend over there in the room, Ben, he knows I've had a very tough one to really see the value into this, and I had to reach out to a couple of mates to discuss this and see whether we could find real value and what one can actually use it. And I must admit, from my personal experience, the more I got to play with it, the more the ideas just actually start popping and working with it. So just for the sake of time, I'm not going to bore you with all these long texts and things to read through. I'm going to give you the highlights. Look at that. Okay, so basically two types of desktop Power Automates that we can get, or desktop flows, attended and unattended. Please be aware they are licensed differently as well. But basically the difference is the attended flow means you need to trigger it, you need to kick it off. Unattended flow basically means it's just a process that runs in the back. It will take over the machine. So if you're running it on a virtual machine and that it needs to have full access, and I'll show you that a little bit later on, you can with these desktop apps sometimes get quite funky with it by moving the mouse around and it's thinking it's clicking somewhere and you've unfortunately just moved the mouse at a specific time and it's not clicking where it's thinking to click. So there's a couple of things like that. It becomes quite interesting. But the big thing is attended versus unattended. One needs the user to actually trigger the flow. The other one doesn't. And be aware that the R last is completely different. And also the fun part is if you do want to play with the Power Automate Desktop, it is actually free until you start obviously utilizing some of the other special elements of it. So more than welcome to go and have a look. Please install it and play around with it. You can actually do quite a lot within the free capacity. Right, cloud versus desktop. So basically this is just when do I do Power Automate, when do I do a desktop flow. So pretty much I think it is straightforward. Desktop flow, for me the desktop is something that I want to execute on my machine or that I can't necessarily get access to. And for one of them, that what you'll see a little bit later on, and please don't be any haters, I did a quick console app with an old Windows app, basically to say there aren't any APIs, but you can actually extract that information and move them from the one application to the other application without basically any form of code being written. So you can extract information from one app to another. And that's the thing for me. Desktop flows is really where you're looking at those scenarios where you don't have APIs available. Or alternatively, one of the scenarios that I helped out with a mate when I was doing this internal struggle about where do I really get the use for desktop flows. And his scenario was he had a work task that he actually had to export in the financial industry. He had to export annual reports for every customer that he's got on his book. And then you had to send them an email with that extracted report. Now, that sounds like a very nice and easy thing to do from a work perspective. However, when you discuss his book, he has 300 customers. So that means he does the same thing 300 times over and over again. And that takes him a good 1 week. And that just gets repeated the next month. And that was actually a very nice use case that we actually utilized that to actually give that search capability inside Excel. And it would actually connect to the system to actually execute those reports, download the PDF, attach it, and send the email off. So all of a sudden that work gets done now in a matter of minutes versus him doing it one by one. So that was one of the scenarios, and I'll take you through how that actually works and plays out. And then just bring it all together. Basically what you'll have is, you don't forget about your AI builder, those things, the tools that we do get from that perspective. So to extract information, then we've got our cloud flows that can work with our APIs. And then like we've got right now is our desktop flows that can extract information from systems that don't have any APIs, or that's basically just running on-site your own machine or with data that's sitting in a specific location. Whether you want to move files around, things like that. I mean, I'll show you the UI just now. It's relatively straightforward. Typical Microsoft logo there, relatively. There are a couple of items that does catch you out, and I will, as we go through those, I'll take you through them. But let's get started and actually show you what it looks like. Again, I'm just going to ask a question for those probably online as well, and those around the room who's worked with desktop flows, or we've got one hand going up. Nope. Perfect. So after you've downloaded it, let's just quickly do the show and tell. I'll just exit over. You see now, I could move this. And no, I don't want to save it. So once I've downloaded it, I get basically desktop. Come on, you can do it. All right, doesn't look like she wants to do it. All right, so if you search for it, you will get a desktop Power Automate, and you can just open up your desktop Power Automate. You're going to be presented with a screen similar to this one. So there you'll see, for example, there's the open presentation one. So like I said, with a normal Cloudflow, you can, if your connectors and all that is set up correctly, you can actually connect to your desktop flows and execute them from a Cloudflow. So that is one way to have external triggers or other Cloudflows or APIs results, getting information from internal systems, getting that feedback back and passing it on to other systems. So that's the one. The one that I'm going to run for you right now, and then after that we'll go quickly in the edit screen, is basically I'll call it my AS 2021. For those people who might be familiar with the old green screen AS 400. So that's just, this is my modern version on it, and then just a Windows app on it. So basically everybody hands off and the PC is going crazy. I can't remember what that step was. Oh my goodness, it's doing a few extra things here. We're just hoping it's working. And it should soon be done. Okay. So basically what it's gone and done is it's opened up my console application. It received information from the console application, transferred that information to my desktop app, and then from there went and opened up Notepad and replace the value. Right, like I said, please don't be any haters. This is a very basic example of everything. My database, worse than Excel, it was Notepad. All right, so, and that's the reason why you'll see, for example, the current balance over there is I think, what's that, 400,000 or something like that, or 4 million. And if I do a refresh on the balance, you will see it will be now 5 million. That's in the, after that, I did a quick deposit over there by clicking on the app. So basically the idea behind this, what I just wanted to show is you can actually go and move information from one area completely to a different area. Similar to, you'll see there's a salary run, which will just kind of give you the same type of example where it actually just uses Excel as my source to extract that information. So what does this look like? Okay, so while it says getting things ready, a couple of things that I need to give you a warning about with regards to recording and using desktop flows. One of the things, it does not like multiple screens. Okay, if you're doing your recordings on multiple screens and you rerun it, it will not like you for doing that because it loses orientation and things like that. Things aren't anymore where it was supposed to be. So for example, and I'll show you that a little bit later on as well with doing a desktop recording, because as you can see at the top, I can do a web recording or I can do a desktop recording, and I'll quickly take you through a couple of those examples as well. But those will kind of give you the guidelines or the principles to record the actions that you need to do so that you don't have to drag and drop each of these actions all together. My personal advice would be, if you're new to the technology, do the recording just to see the steps that it actually does, but kind of still do your manual work to kind of do the drag and drop the items across. It's just there's a couple of components that it won't necessarily be aware of that you've done and recorded in your recording that you think it will just be there and then it doesn't work and you're kind of disappointed and you're thinking, okay, well, that was great watching this guy doing desktop flows and his computer did a whole bunch of magic weird stuff without him touching it. But when I had to go back and do it and I recorded it, it doesn't work. And so just my advice, do the recording, see the keystrokes, the items that it does put in, but from there, just copy that and into your own process. So what you'll see at the top over here is to say run application. I do a UI click over here. So you can actually go and edit this and I can view my components on the UI element itself. And what you'll see over here, once we hit the hover over, is it will actually tell me what's the areas that I'm actually, that it's recorded. And this also comes down to why it doesn't necessarily like these two screens or multiple screens when you're doing the recordings, because it kind of in the back puts those into specific X and Y positions and things like that. So like when you're clicking on items, click on the middle, not on the side, because it tends to not find those, and then you end up re-recording and recreating these components. So, but you've basically taken through all the components that you want to record, and it goes through the steps from the top to the bottom. You'll see over there, I can do keystrokes, I can extract data from a specific window. So you basically click on this and it will be aware of where you want to try and get that information from. The big thing on the side is over here is these are all the actions. So again, similar to what we've got with our Power Automate, where we've got, in this case, basically not so much a trigger, but more just the actions that you wanted. The triggers you running or executing the desktop flow. But from there, what do you want to do? So for example, on file, you'll see you can do copy files, move files, get all the files in a directory. If I go to Excel, for example, you see there's quite a lot that I can do with Excel. There's Outlook, there's SQL, well, there's databases, and that there's actually really a lot of components that you can work, and you've just got to play around and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So if I had to run this inside this, let's actually exit this one. And let's open up. I can't remember now which one shall we do. Let's do this one. Come on. Okay, let's not do that one. Let's go back to this one. Any questions while we wait for that one to load? One of the things I do want to do on a recording quickly for you is I want to record a session so that you can see how that process works, the steps that it's going to come through, what is the screen recorder going to look like. But are there any other questions while we wait for the second loading?
Are all those actions part of the like I guess a free version, or the ACR capabilities?
Yes.
Get it.
OCR capability, I need to check for you, but as far as I know, they are actually available in the free license.
Yeah, all those actions there.
Yeah.
So that paste into Notepad, you mentioned AS100, so you can scrape out of things like VMS and other text-based screens?
Yes. That's a kind of the reason why I went for the console app and the desktop app, to show you that screen scraping capability.
Yeah.
So yes, no, you can definitely scrape that from whether you do a website, whether you do a desktop app, and that you can extract the information. Relatively straightforward. So basically one of the things is I can do a run by action, which is going to be my take through step by step. Or alternatively, if I run it from inside over here. So the difference was the previous run that I did from external. So I just executed the desktop flow. So over here, basically what I'm doing now is I'm running it inside the designer. So it will actually stop and break at my breakpoint. Yep. So you'll see basically it stopped there to do a trim on the text. And again, I'm doing a lot of extra steps over here just purely because I'm making it work. And from here, I can actually step through. But what is important is on the right-hand side, I can actually see what my variables are starting to do. So I can see, for example, there's the extract that it's going to do. What is that extracted value looking like? And I can actually now start working with that extracted values to trim them to get to specific informations. So on this one, for example, as well, I've used the line break as my split delimiter on the array of the text. And that's how I got to the deposit value that I went and deposited back into it. So to actually double up on my money. So I can basically just over there. So there you'll see, for example, my delimiter over here is my new line break. So at this point in time, my variable text deposit extract which is over here. So if I click on view, you'll see that the value basically that I'm getting back for that variable has got basically a line break for that. So I can use that and I've split it out. And from there further on, I kind of still split out between the NZ dollar and the space and that. So, I mean, yes, there's going to be components that you need to be mindful of and wary. So but once you start playing around and getting that information back from your recordings, you can actually start extracting and working with those values to get to the exact value that you want to move around. And like I said, similar to this can run Excel. So it runs Excel quite nicely. It works and does the loop through. You'll see on the left-hand side after this is done, as you can do your loop. So for each, you can do a loop until. So you've still got all that logic to kind of work with and play around with inside the designer itself.
Is there any way to automate testing on this? Like any test automation? Like, you know, like Canvas app, you can give some scenarios and run it, make sure at least the regression is going fine.
So that's a good question, whether you can do testing around this. So I mean, yes, you'd probably be able to do, I mean, I can't see why you would not be able to do your recording on that from a web front end perspective. And then obviously what you will have to do is kind of have Excel as your expected results, and then you can do a condition statement on that, whether it passes and fails. And then you can extend that onto your Excel spreadsheet to say, yes, this one was a positive result because you received the value back that you expected. Okay. So I would definitely be able to massage it into something like that. Okay, so one of the things is that I wanted to show you quite quickly is, let's exit this one. I'm going to do a new flow and just call it show and tell. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to do one recording where I'm going to search directly for a calculator, well, open up a calculator, do a basic 2 + 2 on the calculator, and then rerun that flow after my recording's completed. So to start a desktop recorder, there's a nice button there at the top. You'll see the other one is the web recorder. Both components over there, you'll see over here on the UI automation. That's the word I was looking for. So you'll see Windows and form filling, and underneath there, you'll see, for example, web and web automation as well. So all the components you can, what the recording is going to do, you can use the controls on the left-hand side to replicate what the recorder is going to record at this point in time. So I'm going to say start recording. And then we wait for our recorder to pop up. And I'm going to say record. So basically what it will do is it will put focus rectangles, these red blocks basically around areas that I want to say these are areas of interest. So for example, if I wanted to focus on a value over here, you'll see I can hover over it. It will populate whether I want to do an edit, copy the value and things like that. So for right now, what I want to show you quickly is just where the recording works and where the recording doesn't work, just so that you can see the difference between them. So I'm going to say run calc. Ooh, what did I misspell there? Okay, so one of the things is we don't want to run that one, so I'll just go and delete that one. And from that, hold on, I think I've deleted too many items. We'll just delete and start again. So run. And from there, I'm going to do a 2 + 2, and I'm going to hit equals. So you'll see in the recorder, basically, like I did a little bit earlier on, I went and deleted my steps quite quickly. From here, I'm going to say finish. And it will tell me what it recorded. So there you'll see basically it goes and repopulates everything that I did. Now, one of the things is what I'm going to hit on the run right now. And now hopefully I get the same bad experience. It might be because I was previously on multiple monitors, but it didn't like it when I did this. And purely just because it didn't pick up, there you'll see it basically fails on not trying to find the text box. So very bad experience. I hit record my first time doing this. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. And it's not picking up those short keys that I did for those quick controls to actually get to the calculator. If I had to do another recording and I would record just a calculator, it would actually be able to pick that up. So those smaller commands in that, it doesn't pick up. So that's why I say from my experience that I have had with this, it is better to launch your applications and work with your, so create those initial trigger points, and from there, do your recordings, get those recordings to go through. And my advice would be still take that forward to writing these out, because what I do find is with the record, it adds a lot of variables, and you don't think about these variable names and how to use them. So my advice is do your recording to see what the steps are, but then you can go from there and replicate them. Any questions?
I'm new to this, so it didn't know how to launch calculator like you did. Is that what you
Yes, because I did the shortcut keys to open up the calculator. It doesn't know how to open it. That's why if you go to the ones that I had with the desktop or the console application, I told it specifically launch application or launch Excel. And then I can go and so like, for example, if I do the recording now again, which I'll do, I just want to, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll just ask for Q&As and that afterwards. And then, but I'll do another recording for you after this where if I record it with the calculator open, it works fine. It's just that initial steps that I did, the recorder doesn't pick up. So those are components and areas that you need to play around with and make sure you get it working for you. My advice is normally try and get the applications open up first, and then you do your recordings thereafter. Any other questions? So either I've left everybody horribly confused or I was really good at presenting. I don't know yet how to take that one, but we'll ask that a little bit later. So one of the things is I just want to show you my failed attempt over here.
So just before you move on, there is a question from Cara. Is the issue with the shortcut key, or would it work with the mouse click?
That's a good question. I haven't tried that. And we'll probably be able to work with the mouse clicks if you can get to specific areas on the mouse clicks, because it does follow the clicks around. So we can do another recording for that as well. The only thing is I didn't have a shortcut for my calculator, so I couldn't click through to it. But other shortcuts that it does have, that I did have, for example, opening up Excel and things like that, it would actually pick up. I never had an issue with doing those recordings. So it will probably work. You just need to make sure you've got the right areas.
so if it was pinned to the bottom, for example,
then you would just be able to click it, correct?
Yeah. Okay.
So, and one of the things, like I mentioned, I was really battling in the beginning to try and find a suitable real life working use case. And that's where I kind of had this conversation with my mate. And we actually ended up, when we did that recording, to record everything from the start of the process to the end of the process. And the only thing that what we ended up doing was we asked the IT department to basically give him a VM that was logged in as himself and basically replicated his desktop to that VM. So he could still continue working as is, because what you saw earlier on, my computer basically went crazy, just started opening up stuff and that. So if I had to be working and having the attended Power Automate running, then it can be a little bit of a nuisance. I mean, Excel you can open up in the back end. You don't always have to show all the screens, but obviously you want to keep the processing things in that open. But when we moved him to a replicated VM, kind of just had the areas working for him. So one of the things I just quickly wanted to show you before those who need to go can go, but this was my initial one when my gateway was giving me issues. You'll see there it's actually number 5, which tells you that I've actually had 5 retries to try and get my gateway working. For some reason, I wasn't getting any love. And unfortunately I ran out of time, but basically executing a desktop flow from Power Automate or from a Cloudflow is pretty much normally just a matter of adding the action and triggering your desktop flow. And one of the things that you need to do is you need to have a gateway installed that it can actually connect to your PC and get to those desktop flows. Once you've done that, it will should normally work. Unfortunately, my gateway is, I don't know, not giving much love.
So it's locally, gateway's installed locally.
Yes, it's installed locally on your machine. You'll see over there, I've got an on-premise gateway.
Oh, that's a standard, like a data gateway.
Correct. For Power BI. So if your standard one works, I'm quite confident that it will work with this on that machine. All right. Any other questions before we do a quick rerun on that other automated the recording? Anybody online? All good. Okay, so I'll do another recording so that we can quickly follow and see if the mouse clicks and all that will work through. I'm going to show you with the application being open. And for those who do need to leave, thank you very much for your time, or referring to anybody online. Everybody here is enjoying mints and some water, so we will continue on this side. Okay, so what I will do is, and that's the one thing, is I'm going to quickly just do an exit, don't save.
So what does the premium stuff do?
What does the premium stuff do? If you fully licensed, basically you can do an unattended flow. You basically get full access. So from my understanding, what I've had a look at the license card is, if I've licensed for it, I can do the call from Power or from a Cloudflow to my desktop flow, and it gives me access to unattended flows as well. And then I haven't been able to connect from this to cloud. Can only go from cloud to desktop.
Right. Sure, you're stuck on the browser.
Well, you could probably record that step, right? Okay, so in our new scenario that we've got over here, I've got the calculator open. And I'm going to record it, and we should get the recording come up over here. And I'm going to say 2 + 2.
If you were to move the calculator to a different position on the screen, but it's still
So that is an interesting question. Normally it doesn't really impact it that much by doing those things. I'll rerun it now and move it for you. What I've played around with resizing the desktop app and that, I have found issues with the web recorder, and because one of my mates' scenario was he needed to upload all his stuff to Teams, and that was getting to those actions and clicking on the upload, and that didn't really like all of those UI elements, and we had to do those re-recordings exactly into the middle, because in the beginning kind of like off center and everything's going to work, and then unfortunately it doesn't always work. So, but what you'll see over here, that the 2 + 2 quite easily. And so if we go over here, let's move it and kind of test it out, Ben. But I'm quite confident it will kind of still work.
Quite confident it'll kind of still work. But it did.
But it did. No, I've had some real funnies around this that I have played around. But I've had my most biggest pain points were with the web recorders. So I did another one where, like, one of the scenarios that we get faced quite a lot from a dynamics perspective is once we start looking at implementations with multiple currencies. So what I did is I recorded a session to go to an exchange website download, well, copy the information from the website, and I would actually record back to Dynamics and just populate all my exchange rates, and I could just run that, and there I go, 0 developer integration perspective. I mean, it's not the ideal, it's just something I was kind of playing around with a bunch of different scenarios, and that was one of the things that I could do quite easily and have my dynamic system being updated.
Can you switch that to sign the mode and view anything?
Just say again?
The calculator,
Yes.
standard, can we switch to the?
Oh my goodness, I don't know how to do that. Yes. Oh, to do that, sure. Let's do that. Okay. Let's go back to standard. Okay, so we'll do another recording over here.
No.
Without recording, can you switch to sign the?
Oh, to kind of just change everything up like that.
That would be pretty impressive if it did.
Sure thing.
Give it a go.
Why not? Scientific? Happy with that? So what you will see. Oh, am I running the right one now? Yeah. Did I run the right one? Okay, now we're going to get the surface powerful. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So one of the things is what you will see is, and I don't know if this is really where it comes down from a multi-screen perspective, is it will actually, if you look at the UI elements, it actually reads the actual text as well inside there. So similar to, like I said, with my other recording, the previous one with regards to extracting the information from the websites, I initially did that as a desktop recorder to play around with that versus the web recorder, and my desktop recorder actually started looking for the specific values inside the exchange rates, and I actually ended up having to move my cursor a little bit more to the side to pick up other elements inside the page that would record it a little bit differently, because it will, depending on where you are at, it will actually look for different components. It will look for specific text components inside a button and that as well. Right, so then the last one that I'll just quickly show you is this one that I've got over here, which is that one that I spoke, but it's just a quick one that does basically pretty much a salary run type of scenario. And what you'll see over here is I'm launching Excel. I've got basically an Excel file that's got a bunch of people's names against them and employee 1, 2, and 3 before you start thinking I've got real people's names in there. And then just some salaries behind it. And basically what this one will do is it will actually open up Excel, go and get those values and run that same console app with those values from what we're obtaining from Excel. So what you'll see, the big one over there is on the current item. If I hover, now you'll see over here. Oh, this is running. Let's stop that. And let's click on edit. So you'll see, for example, I use the square brackets and column 1 to say, okay, well, this is the specific columns information that I'm interested in my Excel object that I'm getting back, or the array. So it takes out all those columns and values inside Excel, and you can specify the range that you want to get information from. And you'll see, to make that work, there was 2 components. The one component that I did was to get selected cell range. And what this gave me is I could actually say, okay, well, give me the last row index, and you can see a first column, last column, things like that. And when I went back to, like, say, cool, at this point in time, I wanted to read from Excel. Okay, and this is now at this point in time where I'm telling you all the fancy stuff I did to make it work, and now I've got hard-coded values in there to say 2. But if we wanted to do end row over here, I can just change that to a variable, and I can say my last row index that I obtained from the previous step. So you can actually use these variables across that. And similar to getting input So the one thing is actually running these things, but you can actually have a dialogue as well to get input from your users as well, which is this display input dialogue, for example. So you can have input variables, output variables. So you can have information from this going to the other area. You'll see over here, I've got subflows. So you can actually run multiple flows inside one desktop flow. So this again is looking at a very positive scenario. Like I said, with the Power Automates and that, don't measure me on that. You need to work on the negative areas as well. So have those catches and that. And similar with your Power Auto, with your desktop flows, is you will see that they do have an on-error branch over here. So you can stipulate what you want it to do. Do you want it to run? Do you want it to go to specific areas? So you can actually create sub branches or other flows to say, well, this is how you want your error handling to do, whether you want that to send out an email and that to the customers. Right, any questions? Okay, well, with that, then thank you. If you've got more questions, I'm happy to ask them or take you through more scenarios. But yeah, that will be wrapping up our session then for today.
Awesome. Thanks, JJ.
Hopefully everybody learned something.
Not a question, just last thing that Eliza mentioned in the chat box here. Congratulating Eric for being awarded as a Microsoft MVP early this year. Not this year, this month. So, go Eric. Yeah, good on him.
Cool.
But yeah, so thanks everyone online and in the room. And I'm just gonna stop recording. I'll see you guys next time.
Perfect. Thank you very much.